The year is 2005. Ubisoft isn't yet a terrible publisher, and they've decided to try their hand at survival horror. But instead of copying everyone else, they try something new. And what do you get when you mix Ubisoft with a rocking ship, parasites, and a whole lot of bad weather? Well, actually, you get pretty sick. That's not a good combination. But you also get a horror game. Thus, ColdFear was born, a game that appears to be left forgotten and hardly talked about. Was there a reason this game was left at sea, or was it simply caught under the waves? It's time to take a first whiff and find out. Does cold fear stink like fish, or is it the sweet smell of survival horror success? Cold Fear was originally announced at E3 in 2005 and was supposed to be published by Namco, but later Ubisoft would pick up the project, making it their first horror game that they ever published. Cold Fear was then later released for the PlayStation 2 and original Xbox on March 15th, 2005 in the US, and would later see a PC release on April 30th, 2005. The game was developed by Darkworks, who made a game in the Alone in the Dark series as their debut game. The company was supposed to later make the game I Am Alive and even released a whole trailer for the game, but later they were pulled from the project by Ubisoft and replaced with Ubisoft Shanghai. This would lead to the company closing in 2011. It appears Ubisoft was still up to their stinky business even then. The game would go on to only sell about 70,000 copies total between all the different platforms and releases. Despite this commercial failure, there was a movie planned for the game in 2006. However, it was scrapped shortly after production started. What about this game reeked so bad it was a commercial failure? Perhaps the issue can be sniffed out by looking at the gameplay. We start out with a cutscene, and you'll notice that it causes the game to freeze, because for some reason, the cutscenes don't work on Steam. They cause your game to freeze while the audio simply plays in the background, so I'll have to explain the setting with some very crudely drawn cutscenes. In Cold Fear, we play as Hansen, a member of the U.S. Coast Guard, after an investigation is called out over the radio, after a Navy SEAL team is killed while deployed on a Russian whaler. We hop aboard the ship to respond to the call, and as we do, all our allies are killed, leaving Hansen stranded and alone. We can walk around the ship fairly freely in this little section, and walking on the board feels great. The characters move with the ship, and apparently Hansen required 9 times as many animations as other third person characters of the time. The ship rocking alone required its own unique program called the Dark Wave Editor that allowed for the programmers to control the movement on the vertical and horizontal axes. This approach led to genuinely impressive boat physics, and they even hold up to this day. And the boat really feels genuine, and you feel every sway with the characters, and it feels like a real ship that you could expect in real life, all within a video game. You'll also notice throughout the game that for a ship that has a mysterious creature that can kill Navy SEALs and is attacking people, there are a shocking number of militiamen on board, but there's a complete lack of other NPCs. The game also follows the classic survival horror aesthetic. You have a variety of weapons with limited ammo and health pickups to take down a variety of enemies. Cold Fear features limited save points that do get a little close together near the end of the game, but they do tend to be right near sections that either have a one-shot kill or right before something new is introduced. So it can be not as frustrating, and it tends to fit with the game pretty well. One twist this game put on the formula that I found pretty frustrating is the lack of inventory. This forces you into leaving health packs when you don't need them, or if you ever need a health pack later, you can be left without one, or you have to backtrack across a whole map just to get one. Another interesting design decision is the resistance meter. Whenever you sprint, your resistance meter will gradually deplete until empty. The resistance meter is used for sprinting, but also to fend off certain enemy attacks and to fend off from sliding off of the boat. This will become important later in the game, but the resistance bar is never really an issue, even if you are sprinting around the entire game. The game is in a third person perspective and features an over the shoulder aiming method that really fits with the game, and I personally really enjoyed using. This game also features 8 different enemies that you'll see throughout your adventure, including the militiamen, who are basic humans with guns, exomutants, who are humans infected with an exocel, exomutants 2.0, which are basically the same and spawn an Exocel upon defeat. Exocels, who are these little parasite things with stretchy limbs, and they take 2 hits to defeat. Exonests, which are just spawners for Exocels, but they're extremely infrequent throughout the game, and almost always have explosive barrels right next to them, and are super easy to destroy. Exoshades, which are like the dogs from Dark Souls, but somehow even worse. These guys will make your life terrible. They're extremely fast, they climb on walls, and they're bullet sponges. Usually when set on fire, they'll cower, but sometimes, even despite being set on fire, they'll continue to attack, which then causes you to be set on fire, and you instantly die. Exomasses, which are the closest thing to a mini-boss in the game. Their weakness is their giant arm, and this took me a while to figure out, and it's not best suited to the player, but if you just shoot the arm, they go down super easily. And the Exospectre, which are invisible enemies. They aren't nearly as difficult to take down as it sounds, but they are total bullet sponges, and they're super tanky for no reason, and they'll easily make you burn through ammo. The militiamen, exomutants, and exocels make up the majority of the enemies you'll see in the game. For me personally, the exomutants and exomutants 2.0 have no difference. I couldn't tell a single difference. But despite the relative lack of enemies, I never really found myself getting tired of any combat or any of the enemies until near the very end of the game, when it just felt like it was throwing enemies as general ammo fodder. There is an important rule of ColdFear though, and that's to always aim for the head. It saves ammo, which is important in any survival horror game, but more importantly in ColdFear, it prevents enemies from reanimating. Exocels can approach dead corpses and reanimate them to attack you again, or exomutants will rise again and attack you if you don't shoot their head. If you fail to headshot an enemy directly, you can always just walk over and shoot them, or you can walk over and Hansen channels his inner mafia and just curb stomps them. The over-the-shoulder aiming method really comes in handy when defeating enemies here, and it'll probably be your main form of combat. It helps to ensure accuracy and helps immensely in hitting those headshots. Speaking of combat, we aren't left defenseless from these hordes of enemies. We have our own weapons that we can use. The 45 pistol is your best friend throughout the playthrough. It's a semi-auto, but if you're just accurate, it can take out swarms of enemies. And if they get up close and it comes to it, you can just spam the trigger really fast, and it's essentially an auto. I found myself resorting to this weapon most of the game, as it has a laser sight, which helps immensely with accuracy and lining up shots, and enemies frequently drop ammo for the weapon. Next is the AK-47. I hardly use this weapon throughout the game, as it's a fully auto and it burns through ammo super quickly. But enemies do tend to frequently drop ammo for the weapon, and it's great for clearing rooms and swarm of enemies, as it also has a laser sight. Next is the spear gun. I never really found myself using this until the late game, as it doesn't do damage, but it does draw enemies of the Exo variety towards it. It can even leave some of them stunned for a short while, allowing you to remain safe while you shoot them. Next is a shotgun, and this weapon is amazing. It pushes enemies really far back and does amazing damage, and it's insanely easy to get headshots with it. It doesn't contain a laser sight, so aiming can be a little weird, but you'll get used to it super quickly. It'll likely be your primary weapon in the second half of the game, when the areas become more constrained and tight. Next is a grenade launcher, and this weapon stinks. It's absolutely terrible. I can probably throw the grenades farther than the gun, and it doesn't hold much ammo at all. Explosive barrels are quite prevalent throughout the game, especially in areas with large amounts of enemies, so you can just conserve ammo and health by just shooting the barrels and then hiding behind cover until they explode. This weapon is great for taking down the exomasses though. Next is a flamethrower, and I personally never really found a whole lot of use for this weapon, but it's still an amazing weapon. It's really good against the exoshades, but the weapon can be hard to use outdoors, and it takes a few seconds to heat up before it does damage. And late to the party, and last in our arsenal, is the MP5 submachine gun. You get this weapon super late in the game, basically only having it for the final boss, and it's never really that important in the main sections. It's outclassed by the AK if you want an automatic, and outclassed by the pistol if you want to conserve ammo and get headshots. This weapon is super great for the final boss though, but outside of that, doesn't see much use. The game also features this weak little elbow push that you can use, but enemies should never be getting close enough for you to have to use it. And even if they do get close, once you unlock the shotgun, this becomes even more irrelevant. I did notice that ammo and health pickups are super abundant throughout the game, and you even have rooms like the ammunition room and medbay that provide you with essentially unlimited ammo and health packs. I never found myself running out of ammo on any of the weapons until near the end of the game, but even then my other weapons just were full of ammo, and I just switched, and then I looted some enemies and I had my ammo right back up. Even on the higher difficulties, ammo isn't that hard to come by, and health packs aren't that important because enemies will just kill you in one hit. An important piece to note is that destroying enemies by electrocution or burning, like with the flamethrower, will cause them to drop absolutely nothing, which can put you in a tight spot if you're low on ammo. It's not incredibly difficult to avoid damage from enemies if you're careful. The most dangerous enemies you'll come across are actually the Exoshades and Exocels. The Exoshades are just extremely quick, but I did find out near the end of the game you can stunlock them with their shotgun and spear gun. And the Exocels can be difficult to spot at points, and they can crawl in the ceilings, making them even harder to see, but they also have an extremely large range that is deceptive, and it can easily catch you off guard if you're not careful and if you're not paying attention. The game is split up between two areas. The first half of the game is spent entirely on the Russian whaler, and the second half is spent on an oil rig. Despite the whaler boat taking up approximately half the game, the section feels extremely like a tutorial. The enemies and areas are fairly spread out, and it's never too hard to take enemies out before they get to you. The area does contain swinging cargo though, and hooks that would damage you if you aren't careful, and there's waves splashing on board that can damage you, and the tilting of the ship can instantly kill you if you aren't paying attention. Overall though, this section of the game isn't too hard, and there's only a few sections where you're cramped into a tight space, and even then the amount of enemies is pretty low, and they're relatively easy to take care of. The second half of the game takes place on the oil rig, and is in my opinion a really good space. It feels just large enough that you can get lost if you aren't paying attention, but it's not too large to the point that getting lost feels like a chore, although backtracking can get extremely frustrating at times. Overall, both locations are amazing. However, the ship can feel a little small at times, and both areas can just get a little too open with some of the rooms, where taking out enemies becomes so easy that the enemies don't even have a chance to become a threat before you take them out. Another issue with the locations is the game appears to dissuade exploration. There are a few collectible journal entries throughout the game, but 90% of them are on your main path throughout the game. Even when you do attempt to explore, Hanson will either yell at you, or you'll hear this audio.
Great, it's locked.
A lot.
Locked.
No, like really, a lot.
Great, it's locked.
Most of the extra rooms in the game, they just include ammo or health packs, and no extra story elements or anything. ColdFear isn't the longest or hardest survival game. My first playthrough only took about 4 hours, and unless you play on extreme difficulty, where everything just one-shots you, you'll probably coast through. But mechanics aside, does the story hold up? Let's sniff out any plot holes and find out. As mentioned before, the story begins on board the Russian whaler. Our first mission is to get the emergency radio code from Lansing, who should be on the front deck. We are free to explore the front area of the ship before making our way across the deck to the other side, where we enter inside the vessel. We're greeted by our first two enemies, which we easily take out before turning a wheel and putting out a fire. There's a woman in the room next to us, but we have to wait before being able to free her. Once we continue into the area that the fire was blocking off, we can enter the armory. This will be relatively useless for now, but we can go down the stairs, which will give us a key card that we can use later. We then go back up these stairs, but not before shooting the electrical box, and we continue on to our next room. Here we can find the medbay and 4 other rooms. For now, we continue on with our mission. We open the door straight ahead as we enter the lower deck. We traverse through some rooms before coming out around a burning fire, where we turn the handle and start the sprinklers in the room. After doing this, we approach a door and go back out onto the deck. There are a couple mercenaries that we shoot down here, but nothing too challenging. We continue on to the front of the ship and approach the stairs as we approach the dormitory. The dormitory is full of dead bodies, and as we approach the bathroom at the end of the room, we can see Lansing sitting on the toilet, dead. We walk over to shake him, but his head falls off, and as we turn around, our first exomutant kills a militia man in front of our eyes. We kill the exomutant and exit the room, but not before saving. Our next mission is to find the radio room. Once exiting the dormitory, we're greeted by a group of exomutants attacking a militiaman. After defeating the enemies, it's important to be careful because it's easy to get slid off the boat, which will result in an instant death. After we work our way around the boat, we can continue back inside, grab the hand wheel for the fish hold, which was the room that was up the stairs in the flooded room, and we'll need this to advance the story. We make our way back to that flooded room and use our newfound hand wheel to open the fish hold and enter. Once in this room, we work our way down from the walkway that we're on, and we enter one of the best rooms in the game. Standing before us is a dead killer whale with its chest open. Once we grab the key in front of this orca, it jumps at us briefly, and exocels spew out from it. We take care of the exocels, and we exit the room. Our next goal is to find the radio room. We exit the flooded room before retracing our steps from the beginning of the game. Now, exocels and exomutants have begun to spread throughout the ship. They'll be our primary enemies for a little bit, along with some militiamen spread along the way. We enter the radio room, and we're contacted by CIA agent Bennett. He'll guide us through most of the rest of the game. He gives us orders to find Ubisoft, a Russian mafia agent. We exit the room once again, fight through exomutants and mercenaries, and make our way to the rear deck house. We find Ubisoft, who explains to us that exocels are parasitic organisms that take over a host. He gives us a code for an armored door and a code for the door with the girl behind it from the beginning of the game. This girl is Anna Kamsky, the daughter of a scientist named Viktor Kamsky, who Ubisoft brought onto the mission to investigate the exocels and perform experiments. The game elucidates experiments throughout the game, whether through the documents that you pick up or logs, and it is revealed that the mob and Russian government were planning to use the exocels to create super mutant soldiers that would be stronger and more resistant than normal humans, which they could then use to bolster their military and take over the world. After saving Anna, we have to guide her to the radio room, and she's not very hard to protect. The enemies that you come across will mostly just focus on you, and there's only 2 or 3 exomutants that stand in your way. Just stay close to her and the mission will be a breeze. Luckily, it's the only escort mission of the game, and it's fairly short, and I found it to not be too annoying. It's just very important that you do not accidentally hit Anna, or she will limp, or you can even kill her. After we let Anna into the radio room, she goes to call her father aboard an oil rig, but nobody can seem to find him on board. Our mission changes, as we now have to turn off the autopilot so that we can redirect the boat towards the oil rig to find Dr. Kamsky. To unlock the autopilot, we have to find the unlock code, which is on the captain of the ship, who, for some reason, is A, the only person with the autopilot code, which I guess is reasonable because he's the captain, but B, he decided the best course of action to deal with zombies was to lock himself inside a cryogenic chamber on board a ship that has no remaining crew and is stranded in the middle of the ocean. I have no idea what he was thinking. But nonetheless, we work our way through the inside of the ship and make our way to the pumping station. After activating the pumps, the room that was once flooded will now be clear, and we are free to investigate the rooms. One of the rooms inside is the cold room, where we find the captain dead.
Okay, I found the captain. He's a corpsicle.
We collect the key off of the captain's corpse, something Bennett says we should be used to.
Search the body. You got experience with that, right?
We make our way to the captain's quarters, which is a beautiful room with amazing wood and craftsmanship. I really wish more rooms in the game would look like this, because it really breathes some more character into the ship and overall atmosphere of the game, and it really gives us some insight to the captain as well. But there's no time to waste on this, as we are shooting straight for the oil rig. We have to meet Anna on the outlook post. This is one of my favorite missions of the game. We exit the interior of the ship, and we exit into the harsh weather as we climb higher and higher on the ship. And as we climb higher and higher, the ship begins to sway more and more, and there's a ton of enemies in this section, and the combat here is extremely enjoyable. It's worth noting that the music for combat in this game is absolutely incredible.
Hurry up, Hanson!
No time to spend enjoying music, I guess. And we approach the crow's nest. We crash the boat onto the oil rig and jump off the crow's nest to attempt to reach the platform. However, we fail, and Hanson falls into the ocean and washes onto a platform on the oil rig, but not before being affected by an exocel. Due to our crash, we have no health, and we only have a pistol to our name with no ammo. This section can be a little confusing, but just run around the platform to get to the other side before entering the elevator to attempt to find a medbay. We end up finding a medbay after a short exploration and meet Dr. Pavel, who cures us of the exocel and then leads us out of the medbay to guide us on our adventure. But right as he turns to give us some advice, he's killed by a mysterious creature with his own corpse dropping right in front of us. We grab a storeroom key off of his body before continuing on the way. Shortly, we'll fight the worst enemy in the game, the Exoshade. These enemies are the bane of my existence, but the fight with this one isn't so bad. The fight is fairly open, and it's easy to force the Exoshade to run away. It just takes so many bullets. It can really mess up your ammo. We investigate the surrounding rooms, and we continue on our journey where we'll be met with laser mines. This section took me a while to figure out what I was supposed to do. I started by trying to shoot the mines, which did not work. But once you figure out that you're supposed to crouch underneath the lasers, it's not so terrible. It can just be a little frustrating because the game expects you to get pretty close to the edge of some missing sections of the platform, and it can cause you to fall off and die pretty easily. But once we get to the other side and enter the room, we'll enter into a massive open storeroom where we fight a huge swarm of mercenaries, and then we have to fight a man, Anashenko. He's a mafia leader. We have to kill him to steal his eye, to scan on an eye scanner to gain entrance to a room. This storeroom is very difficult, and it took me a few tries, and every time you die, you have to go back and do all the laser mines again. But we defeat Anashenko, we steal his eye, and it's very important that you do not make the same mistake as me. Do not go up the elevator in this section yet. I made this mistake, and it made it so I had no health packs or ammo before the final boss, making me basically have to do the final boss hitless. But don't go up there, and you'll be fine. Once we steal Anashenko's eye, we move to the communication room to gain entry, and destroy a jammer that was aboard the ship preventing our contact with Bennett. We blow up all three magnetic field pillar things, and somehow our contact is reestablished. Don't ask me, it just makes sense. When we exit the room, we see on a screen that Anna is being infected by an exocel, and we rush to find an antidote to save her. Bennett originally frowned upon us going to save Anna, but upon hearing that there's an antidote, his mood completely changes, and suddenly he supports us going to save Anna. We traverse through a previously locked door to approach a science module in hopes of finding an antidote to cure Anna. We travel to the habitation module where we see it's covered in some pink goop. We try to enter the door, but fall down the vent into an area that is fully encased in the pink goop. It appears that this may be an exocel nest of some sort. We can see like a super mutated person at the back of the room, and the design of this character is impressive, and it's very cool to look at. I'm sure this character would end up, like looking like a super massive enemy that we later fight, possibly at the end of the game. Crazy talk, right? But oh well, there's no conclusive evidence on what this pink purple goop is, and the exocels explode green when they're defeated. So my theory is that this purple goop might be like a giant exocel nest that super mutates the people who are inside it, almost like a cocoon. Once we escape from this room, we move into the underwater elevator as we advance in our attempt to find the antidote for the parasite. The first exoshade is introduced, and it's not hard to take care of. Just remember to use the spear gun and you'll be fine. The hardest part of these enemies is their ability to sponge ammo. You can try to use heavy damage weapons like the shotgun to take them out, but it still takes immense amounts of ammo. But it's fairly easy to tell if these enemies are around, because even though you can't see them, the battle music will still play, and they will jump on you, which begins an event where you have to spam the interact button to force the exoshade off while your resistance meter drains. The initial jump deals no damage, so as long as you have enough resistance and spam your interact key enough, you'll keep all of your health. We investigate around these areas, passing through some visually interesting medical rooms like a morgue and such. I would have liked to see more medical areas like this, especially because the game comments on how there were so many experiments done in the Exocels, and I feel like adding more of these rooms would have really added to an atmosphere, especially on the oil rig, where the rooms can just feel kind of like samey and kind of story almost, like storagey almost. But eventually we come out to Dr. Komsky's lab, we grab the antidote, and we have to make our way back to Anna to administer the antidote. In Dr. Komsky's lab, you can interact with the table, which will cause a laser to cut the exomutant in half. It's a really cool cutscene, but I feel like it doesn't fit with the type of experiments that he was performing, so I don't entirely know why it's here. But nonetheless, doesn't matter. We travel throughout the science area part of the game, and we just retrace our steps to get back. This is the part of the game where it starts to get a little frustrating because we're backtracking through the same areas over and over again, and there's not really too much differentiation from the first time that we've been there. A lot of times there are no new enemies, it's just an empty room that you run through. But after working our way all around back through the oil rig where we've already been, we find ourselves at the main lab elevator, and we find a new enemy, the Exomass. The first time finding these guys, it'll be the hardest, as first off, they're entirely new, and they break the usual rules of the game. You can't go for the head, because it does no damage, or at least extremely little damage. You have to go for the giant arm, and once you figure this out, the enemies are really easy to take out, especially with their shotgun. So we work throughout the level, find Anna, administer the antidote, and then we pass out, and we get reinfected somehow. And then it's revealed that Anna administered the antidote to save us. But this brings up so many plot holes. A, if she already had an antidote near her, why do we have to go all around to the science habitation module to find an antidote to save her? And B, if she didn't have an antidote, how did she get one? It's not like a huge writing issue, but while playing the game, you don't really think about it and it's not noticeable. But once you get done playing and you think about the story, this plot scene begins to make less and less sense. It just begins to become more and more of a hole in the plot. But there's no time to worry about the writing. Bennett orders us that we have to move on, and we have to find Kamsky's laptop and send all the info to Bennett. We wander all the way back through the habitation module and the pink goop. The huge creature is still down there, and it's just the same sections that we've been through time and time again. But eventually we find the laptop and we begin uploading the info before getting into a disagreement with Bennett. We want to destroy the oil rig, but Bennett wants to leave it out, and Bennett really is pushing us to send all the info to him. But we shut him out, we close the computer, and we decide to join forces with Anna and destroy the oil rig instead of leaving it for the CIA and US government to pick up. Here, I wish the game would have had a split path decision where you could decide if you go with Bennett or go with Anna. I think it really would have added to the game here, but you don't have an option here. You always go with Anna. You always disagree with Bennett, which I think kind of hinders the game a little bit. I really wish that they did a discussion here. But nonetheless, we have to go gather some C4, and we have to place these explosives around the oil rig. We travel back again to the same locations that we've been through, time and time and time again, working our way through the underwater tunnels and the lab sections. But at the very least, we do get the M5, which is a weapon that we only use for the last boss, and it's so late in the game that there's no point in giving it to us. But whatever. Most of the rooms that we've already been through now have exomasses in them, and there's some extra enemies, but again, there's nothing hard to deal with, and overall, the rooms are exactly the same. There's nothing that's changed. But we work our way to the ammo warehouse. We pick up our C4, we work our way back, and we work our way out. We first work our way to the underwater tunnel, and we place the first C4. These scenes, this mission of the game, is incredibly cinematic. It's incredibly impressive. We place the first C4, and we have to run away as fast as we can to avoid being blown up. And we get a scene as we run away from the tunnel, it blows up behind us, and we can see the underwater tunnel begin to fill with water, and the wall of water is chasing us as we run away. Luckily, we get inside and we're safe. And then we go to the bridge room. We place an explosive, and we run away as we see the oil rig go up behind us. Explosions everywhere. And whatever was left now behind us, it's all being burned. And I do see a slight issue with Hansen and his plan here. It's very unlikely that any of the Exocels could have survived this, because fire is stated as one of their weaknesses. That's why the flamethrower works. But it's not entirely unlikely that at least one could have survived and gone into the ocean and then found its way to the general human population. And there's no sequel, so obviously this didn't happen. I mean, the game was a commercial failure, so obviously there's no sequel. But if there was a sequel, I think this is what they would have played off, that somehow one Exocel survived and got through. But we start working our way back, and we get to the area where we fought Anashenko. And we go up the elevator that you should not have entered before. And if you did, you're going to have a bad time with this boss, just like I did. But we clear the room at the top of the elevator, and we exit to the helipad to escape, where we have to battle Dr. Kamsky. He's been fully mutated into a horrible creature, and he tries to snatch his daughter and turn her into the same monstrosity. You notice that Doctor looks suspiciously similar to the creature down the pink goop. I'll get to this later, but I have a theory for why that is. Obviously, yes, the two are related. That's not really a secret. And we know from the documents throughout the game that he's been mutating himself. But despite this hulking monstrosity that stands before us, the Doctor doesn't go for us at all. He only focuses on Anna, and we have to hit the Doctor a certain number of times to gain his attention, so he turns away from her, turns to us, and he dashes at us, giving Anna time to place the C4 and move on to the next pillar so that she can do the same there. If at any point during this fight, Kamsky grabs his daughter, it is an instant game over. If you've ever played Dark Souls, though, you'll know exactly how to fight this boss, which sounds really weird, but whenever he dashes at you, he will either swipe with his left or his right arm, and he raises his arm while he's dashing at you. So whatever arm he raises, run to the opposite side of his body. Just like with a boss in Dark Souls, how you circle to the opposite side of whatever hand they have, you do the same for Dr. Kamsky. So for example, if he raises his right arm, you run a little towards him, and then you run to the left. And when he gets close, he'll swipe, and he'll completely miss you. This works 100% of the time. And another tip is that Kamsky will usually swipe with the arm that has more space. If that doesn't make sense, it's like if the left side of Hansen is up against the fence, Kamsky will usually swipe with his right arm. This prediction does not work 100% of the time, though. I found it to be about 90% accurate that he would do the open space arm, but it's not quite 100, so make sure to keep that in mind. And we do all this. Anna places all 3 C4 explosives on all the pillars, and then she runs past the gate to get the helicopter, because the game said that she knows how to fly a helicopter, something that it alluded to earlier. That's right. She knows how to fly a helicopter somehow, because she got bored on an oil rig. owned by the Russian mafia, because you'd be allowed to do that. Just overlook the plot point for now. The writing got a little weaker near the end, but just overlook it. It doesn't matter. We're getting a helicopter off of this. And we enter the next phase of the fight, where we actually fight Kamsky now. Mano el Monstro. I don't know that Spanish. The only way to damage Kamsky is to have him grab you, which opens a scene where you spam the interact button, much like with the Exo Spectres and Exo Shades. And then, after you fill the bar at the bottom, you press the button to fire and you shoot Kamsky point blank. Outside of this one interaction, never shoot Kamsky. It would do no damage, just focus on dodging his dashes like before, and a key tip, run either next to him or right behind him right after his slash. He'll grab you and it shortens the boss fight immensely. It prevents him from dashing multiple times in a row, or even using his leap attack. But you repeat this process 3 total times, and Kamsky would be defeated, and we fly away with Anna, beating ColdFear. The story brings up a few questions, and ignoring the plot holes, the first question that's brought up is, why does the US government even care about the Exocels? And the story doesn't give us a clear answer. It gives the illusion that the US government cares about trying to get the Navy SEALs back, especially at the beginning of the game. However, as the game goes on, it's more and more apparent that the US government has some other motive in this. The first suspicious event is that the first group sent to a distress ship is a group of Navy SEALs, despite there being Coast Guard boats near the ship, as proven with Hansen and his crew. In addition, Bennett's dialogue very clearly shows a vested interest in the Exocels, especially near the end of the game, where he goes angry with Hansen for threatening to blow up the oil rig, and he greatly hates Anna. My theory is that the US government is planning to take out the Russians and then overtake the investigation of the Exocels from them. Now, no, there's not very concrete evidence for this, I'll admit, but Bennett's wish to keep the oil rig and his extreme interest in all the scientists involved in the experiments just for me create some questions about the US motives in the whole situation. And my second question is, what is all that pink goop, and who's that person down there? This theory doesn't really have great evidence. None of the documents really point to this. They only point to Kamsky missing and Kamsky infecting himself and experiments of humans as they grow with the infection. But there's not really concrete information on this. I believe that this entire purple goop section is a cocoon for Kamsky. And that thing that we see at the back of the room is like a shell, like how locusts break out of the shell. The same thing happens here with Kamsky breaking out of there, which is all the purple goop, is just like the liquids that were inside, I guess. And that thing at the back of the room is just the shell of the old version of what Kamsky and his monster used to be like. Some of the logs point to Kamsky and him becoming obsessed with the experiments and obsessed with trying to become one of them, but it's not really fully baked, there's not a whole lot of information on this. So if you have an alternative theory or you know what's going on with either of these two, leave a comment below and just let me know your theory and let me know if my theories sound okay. Overall, ColdFear is a very enjoyable experience. However, it does lack replayability. There's no extra collectibles. There's not really any extra features. The game only has the main game with the different difficulty options. But hey, there's a bonus menu that provides concept art for the game. Maybe we should check that out. Check out the concept art while we're here. I'm sure there wouldn't be any Steam crashing issues again or anything. Oh. Well, that's great. Overall, though, there are some flaws with the game. It definitely leaves you wanting more, just because the game is short and pretty easy. And there are definitely some frustrating parts, especially with all the backtracking in the oil rig section, where the rooms are just so empty and there's nothing really new to bring other than just simple backtracking. But overall, the experience is very fun. It's a pretty cheap game. All the guns feel great to use, and there's some moments that generally got me to jump. And the setting of the game is just unmatched. And the sound design and the design of the rooms are all done wonderfully. And speaking of sound design, the credits have Marilyn Manson on them. I have no idea why. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't fit with anything else in the game. I'm not asking. It's good music. It's whatever. Overall, what does ColdFear get? ColdFear is going to get 8 stinky fish out of 10. Remember, the stinkier the better. The stinkier the better. 8 out of 10. This game is fresher than what's ever in that Russian whaler. If you can ever find this game, play it. Seriously. It's a great experience. It's not that long, and it's super fun. Make sure to stay tuned, and make sure to stink up the subscribe button and slap the like. Stay stinky.